All right, everybody. We're going to talk today about marketing effectiveness. It's the Sasquatch of the marketing world, the abominable snowman, the Loch Ness monster of the marketing world, known as marketing effectiveness, because I'm pretty sure it exists, but it's hard to capture, right? So here at Mighty Citizen, we see a direct correlation between marketing effectiveness and marketing maturity. And so today, we're going to chat about measuring your marketing effectiveness. How mature is your marketing? So I'm Rachel Clemens, the CMO at Mighty Citizen of 20 years of experience, 20 plus years. My strength is in communications and my weakness is pumpkin chai lattes. 'Tis the season. If you're not familiar with Mighty Citizen, we are the branding, marketing, and digital agency for mission-driven organizations. So basically, we help nonprofits and other mission-driven orgs increase their revenue, build their awareness, and better their communities, primarily through things like branding, messaging, campaigns, websites, analytics, anything communications and marketing related. So by the end of today's session, you'll be able to understand the value of marketing effectiveness, measure your own marketing effectiveness. It's going to give you a tool to be able to do that because it is really difficult to do, and take steps to further your marketing effectiveness. So once you know where you are, help you plan where you're going. Now, I want to say up front that this session is mostly about marketing and how to know if what you're doing is working. But I know that we have a lot of fundraisers likely in the group. So for you guys, I want to note that I believe that most of fundraising, or very much of fundraising, is marketing, especially when you're talking about mass appeals and things like that. It's your website, it's your digital efforts that you undertake, it's the content you put out into the world. So even though we're talking about marketing effectiveness today, it does full on affect your fundraising. So I just wanted to note that for any fundraisers in the room. And many of you are probably honestly responsible for both. So if you're thinking this isn't for me, I'd encourage you to stick around. So effectiveness can be hard to measure. Oh my gosh, don't we all know this? I'm going to launch a poll and bear with me. I'm curious, do you know how effective your marketing is? So feel free to say yes or no. Totally anonymous. Nobody's going to know you answered it that way, and definitely not going to call anybody out. But we hear this all the time, that knowing whether your marketing is truly working is a challenge. So it looks like most of you have taken the poll. So let me end this real quick. So you guys can see that only 23% of you said that, yes, you felt like you knew that your marketing was effective, and that you understood whether your marketing was effective, and 3/4 of you said you don't. This very much lines up with when we do this session in other places. We see this all the time. So just know that you're in good company and we're all in the same boat. So yeah, for what that's worth. Sometimes it helps to commiserate a little bit. Now, there are two different ways to measure effectiveness, or really to measure anything, right? There's quantitative data, and of course, as marketers and fundraisers, we all love quantitative data. We're investing more money into getting this data over time. So we're just seeing more and more tech to answer, to help us get at that data. But there's definitely still challenges with it. And so these are some statistics from Deloitte's brand marketing effectiveness study. And it shows that marketers struggle with a lot of different things as it relates to quantitative data. Maybe we don't have actual data for the things we actually want to measure. We have a lot of data at our fingertips, but is it truly what we need to be measuring or want to be measuring? We don't often feel that our data is trustworthy. I've talked to a lot of people, they'll say, I'm not sure that our data is clean and that we truly understand whether it's clean. And they just don't know how to measure to understand effectiveness. So we're all in a good, we're all in good company here. But just all that to say that while we have a lot of data, it's not always super helpful or can be confusing. On the other side of quantitative data, there's qualitative data, and this is primarily based on gut and instincts. So if you ask someone, does your marketing work? I mean, sure, it works, but how do you know it works, right? So unless you have really sophisticated tech in place, the answer is often based on opinion or the opinion of others. And even with sophisticated tech, like a marketing automation platform or business intelligence tech, it'll often give you insight only into your digital efforts, when so much of the marketing that we do in fundraising, for that matter, happens offline, right? So If this question is hard for you, and I know for 75% of you it is, ask yourself what is working for you and what isn't working for you. And I'm going to help you figure out how to do that today. Do you want to say up front that when you're measuring your marketing effectiveness, it does require vulnerability. You know, a lot of you said that you don't know whether your marketing is effective. It takes a lot to admit that. It's not an easy thing to do, but a lot of us are in the same boat. And when you do understand your effectiveness, you can choose who to share it with. So I'm going to give you a tool to measure it. You're going to have a score at the end. And you can choose whether you share that score with your leadership. So you can take it and make pains to change it if you don't like the answer. But really, it's up to you who you share it with. Okay, first of all, I always like to start every session with a why. Why are we doing this? Why does measuring our effectiveness matter? It capitalizes on what's working. So when you know what's working, you can double down and invest in that area that's working. It uncovers low-hanging fruit. Sometimes you don't realize that some of the stuff you're doing isn't effective. So then the question becomes, do we make it more effective or do we stop doing it? And stopping doing something is a very valid exercise, right? We can put our efforts somewhere else. It can save you time and money. So again, if you can focus on what's working, those efforts are going to go further, saving you time and resources. And it also shows you how to augment your team. Many of us are growing or trying to grow. And when you understand what's working, it tells you where your areas of improvement are. And it might be that you want to hire somebody to help in those areas because that may not be your strength or the strength of anyone else on your team. It helps you understand your return on investment. Every one of us that is investing in marketing wants to see for every dollar we spend, we want to see more than $1 come back, and it helps us understand if that's happening. And it helps you ask for investments when needed. We're going to talk more about how to actually use the results of your effectiveness. And one of those is asking for more money. So we're going to tap into that a little bit later. So how do I measure it? It's a great question. Here at Mighty Citizen, we've been asking ourselves the same question for years. I am a marketer too, so I'm in the same boat with you all. And we've been helping our clients answer this question. You know, here they are spending money with us, and we want to be able to turn around and say, this is how we know it's working. So again, we have quantitative data, but we know it has challenges. And of course, qualitatively, often based on gut or instinct. So we wanted to find a way to show progress to our leadership and to our clients' leadership so they could ask for more investment and have a better chance of receiving it. So we set out to answer the question. And we developed something called the Mighty GPS. It's a free, when I emphasize that it's free, self-assessment to measure your marketing maturity. So we call it marketing maturity as it relates to the assessment, but we're really measuring marketing effectiveness. Again, for us, those two go hand in hand. The more effective your marketing is, typically the more mature it is. I want to note here that we are not talking about organizational maturity. We're talking about marketing maturity, how mature your organization's marketing is, not necessarily it's how mature your organization is. And what I mean by that is you could be a very mature organization. So you could be 90 years old and not be effective in terms of your marketing, and vice versa. You can be a really young organization and be very effective. So size really doesn't have much to do with it. The assessment takes less than 10 minutes. Our data is showing most people are spending about 6 minutes doing it. And again, I want to emphasize that it's free. Our MO at Mighty Citizen is to give away our knowledge, help nonprofits do the work to further their market maturity themselves. So everything I'm going to show you here, you do not necessarily have to spend any money to do it. And we'll talk about that. But if you get stuck and need help, of course, you can reach out to us for that. How we built this thing. So we've been talking about a maturity model for years, trying to solve this effectiveness problem. It's hard to find time to work on our own projects like everybody else. But we did pull in different disciplines within Mighty Citizen. We have over 20 years of experience working with mission-driven organizations. And so we pulled in the different disciplines, UX, design, technology. And we said, what are the challenges your clients are facing and what are they doing well and not doing well? Once we put together the assessment, we did some testing with clients and friends, and we worked on their feedback. So that was last summer 2021. And we changed up our scoring a little bit, changed up our questions, revised the questions a little, and then beta launched in November 2021, got feedback from a few more team members. And then we publicly launched in February. And this is a list of some of the people that did that very first testing with us. They are either clients or friends of the agency. And you can see they go across all kinds of different mission-driven orgs. We are open and appreciative of feedback. So if you take the GPS and you find there's something in there you don't agree with or it was confusing, this is not set it and forget it. Like any other marketing initiative, it will be iterated on. And so I highly appreciate any feedback we get, even if it's, whatever it is, I'll take any of it. So the Mighty GPS, this tool itself, is going to measure 6 marketing categories across 4 marketing stages. We're going to go into each one of these. It'll make a little bit more sense, but from a high level, these categories are broad enough to cover most aspects of marketing. There's about 6 to 8 questions in each category. Typically, you'll see like measure your digital marketing maturity. This one is really trying to cover in a broad sense your marketing as a whole. We then establish scores for each of these categories. And then with those scores, give you an overall score. And the score determines your stage. So whether you are crawling, walking, running, or soaring. We have 4 stages, and we'll go into each one of those in a bit more detail. I do see a question in here. Kate's asking, how does the Mighty GPS assessment work for orgs that are part of a larger group of orgs? And like, for example, franchised. Does it assess the org as a whole or your specific market or nonprofit? Yeah, so say you're a chapter of a larger organization. It depends on how you answer it. You can answer it for the org as a whole. My guess is you probably want to answer it for your portion, the thing that you can actually affect. So if you're, say, United Way for Greater Austin, you're part of United Way overall, you probably want to answer it for United Way for Greater Austin. Those are the changes you can actually implement and have control over. Thank you, Kate. Okay, so we're going to recommend when you take the GPS that you take it with your team. A lot of you are fundraisers. You may or may not also be over communications. Even if you're not, you can take the Mighty GPS. Also ask your communications team to take it. If you're at a large nonprofit and you have a separate events team, you may want to ask them to take it. You might want to have your website team take it if you're large enough to have a separate website team. There are other departments at large organizations that it might make sense to have take it as well. They need to know enough about the marketing to be able to answer the questions, but they don't have to be in the marketing department. If you get into it though and can't answer the questions, it probably means that you need to share. Like if you try to answer it and don't feel comfortable, like you know enough, go ahead and share it with your marketing team. And by having the team take it, it's going to show whether you guys have eternal alignment. This is actually a side benefit of the tool. Is typically we'll see when multiple people within an organization take the Mighty GPS, they see if their scores are in lockstep or if there's a lot of variety. If there's a lot of variety in your scores, it means that somebody has a different impression of what's happening within a category than somebody else. And so it allows you to come together and discuss those differences and to sort of land on a area of reckoning and sort of an awareness of where it really should be. It gives a more well-rounded view of your effectiveness. If more than one person fills it out, if you have multiple people on your team to fill it out, it's just going to give you a more rounded view. If you are a team of 1, that is okay, because then you get to affect everything and what you say goes. It can be great for getting new hires onboarded as well. We're seeing a lot of success with people having new hires take it along with the existing team, because it gives you that sort of outsider view while it's still fresh. And it can also help them understand where areas of improvement can be. Okay, I want to quickly go through these 6 marketing categories. So the first is research and analytics. Some of the common questions in this category are, do you understand your audiences? Are you using analytics for further insight? This category is really about understanding your audiences and making sure that the things you're doing, the tactics you're undergoing, are based in research and truth. The next category is branding and strategy. Questions here include, do you have guidelines in place for consistent messaging and branding? And do you have written plans for how you'll communicate with your audiences? Notice written is emphasized there. A lot of times people have plans, but they're not actually written down, and therefore they're hard to come back and know if they were successful. So we push that a lot. Keep in mind with branding and strategy, half of the battle there is just consistency. And so we ask, a few questions around if you're consistent with your branding and strategy. Marketing and SEO is the next category. It asks questions like, have you established key goals and shared those with leadership? Do you use search engine optimization to drive traffic to your website? Keep in mind, it is going to be healthy when you go through and get your results that not everybody can do everything unless you have a really large team. So there's going to be some areas where you're weaker, and you'll have to decide if you want to give emphasis to those areas or if it's okay that you're weaker there. I say this right here in this moment because here at Mighty Citizen, we were spending a lot of time for several years doing SEO. And SEO is basically when someone types a keyword into your search engine and they get results back, SEO affects that. So you can basically increase your chances of getting clicked by including keywords that people search for in your text. Spend a lot of time doing this, involved research and just, certain ways to write content to get those keywords in. And we stopped doing it. It was taking up way too much time on our content side. And we just said, we're going to do a little experiment and see what happens if we stop doing it. And you have to kind of not do it for a while to get enough results. So at the end of this year, we're going to know. We have not been doing SEO in earnest in 2022, and we're going to find out at the end of the year if we should have been, how it's really affected us and if that time savings is worth it. And so all that to say, there will be areas where you just go, it's not worth investing time there, and that's okay. Next category is UX design and content. Do you plan your content to meet audience needs? And does your website support strategic goals? So this one's really a lot around content. Every organization that has audiences, like all nonprofits, content's really important. And we're in the business of creating content that make people care. So this is a big section. Technology, is your website easy to update and maintain? Do your different platforms integrate seamlessly? We all have donation software typically that is maybe separate from our website software. Do those things play nicely together? I'm gonna ask you questions around that. And then lastly, team dynamics. Does your internal team represent a variety of skills? And does leadership believe in the power of marketing? This is the last category we added, and we actually ended up adding it because we saw that a lot of nonprofits, team dynamics really played a part. So you could be doing all the right things, but if you didn't have enough budget, or you didn't have enough support, those things were less likely to be effective. And so you'll see that show up as well. Okay, so when you take the GPS, you're going to get a score, an overall marketing maturity score on a scale of 0 to 100. And then that score will set you within one of the stages. And you can see the scoring breakdown here. Crawling makes up the lowest 40%, and then each subsequent stage is about 20 points or 20% ranges. Of course, these stages run across all those 6 categories. And before we get into each stage, let's do a little gut check. I want to do another poll real quick. And I want to ask you guys, what stage of marketing do you think you're in? Let me pull up the poll. And one of the options is I don't know, because you may not know yet. But generally, we find that many organizations already have sort of a general sense of where they're going to be. And then the GPS either confirms or denies, and it shows that alignment across orgs, right? So I'm going to go ahead and end this poll, and I'll share the results. And most of you say you're in walking. So 65% think you're in walking, crawling's 24%, and running 6%. Nobody said soaring. We're all going to get there someday. And one of you said, I don't know. I will say this is probably accurate. And I'll share more data about what we're seeing so far, but we're seeing most people show up in that walking space. Okay. I'm going to go into each of the stages. So remember where you put yourself in terms of your stage, and then let's see if like the commonalities in that stage sort of line up with where you think your organization lives. I will say there are going to be generalizations ahead. So for each stage, some of the challenges and next steps will be applicable to you, and some will not. Every organization is in a different point along their marketing maturity journey. And so we can't account for every one of those unique qualities. So instead, we've created the stages to best fit what we see in many or most organizations within that stage. So there'll be some things where you're like, well, that doesn't quite fit, but those other things do. And that would be totally normal. So let's look at crawling first. The crawling stage is all about focusing on the fundamentals. Common challenges when you're crawling are that you often have a limited budget, limited buy-in from leadership, often have a lack of resources, whether that's money or team or talent, no concrete goals. It's often that, you're doing what you're doing because you've always done it and not because there's something driving those decisions. And then they are quite often reactive versus proactive. Some of you may be nodding along. Next steps when you are in the crawling stage. Quite often we see that they need to survey the audiences. They just need to take a step back before we go into doing all the tactics. Let's understand our audiences a little bit better. So making sure that what we're saying is actually going to resonate. Establishing your guidelines. Again, it's about consistency, creating a plan and a budget. So written documentation and setting measurable goals and then driving toward those goals and reporting back on this, whether you reach the goal or not. If you're in the crawling stage, you may have already done some of these, but again, probably not all of them. But you'll identify your greatest opportunities and set to work implementing them. This is really important. Do not despair if you are in crawling. It can feel kind of crappy to be in crawling. But the great news about that is that there's a ton of opportunity to make huge and impactful changes. At this stage, just about anything you do can really make an impact. And you can choose to move in any direction to get started. So it can feel overwhelming, but try not to let it overwhelm you because of course the journey's made one step at a time. And we want to get to walking, right? So the walking stage is about establishing full confidence. Your bones are there, but you want to get, you want to know that the work you're putting in is paying off. So you're doing a lot. And it's just about, kind of taking it a little further. You have a strong foundation on which to build exceptional new results, basically. Common challenges are a lack of urgency. Generally, when you're in walking, what you're doing is kind of working. It feels like it's working, and so there's not a lot of impetus to change it, and not a lot of urgency for change. Your decisions are often driven by gut instead of data. Often we have old or clunky technologies where, we're just kind of getting by with what we've got because we have not invested in new technologies. Your UX or user experience is passable, but probably a bit subpar, could be better. And again, you're often still reactive versus proactive. Next steps for walking include optimizing your Google Analytics. So getting some more of that data so you can make better decisions, honing your messaging, prioritizing your user experience, and implementing new technology. Now, again, you might say, Rachel, I think I'm in walking, but my Google Analytics, I know we've got that on lock. That's good. Again, that could be the case where some of these don't necessarily apply to your particular organization. By the way, if you are in walking and you are a team of one, I want you to right now pat yourself on the back because my word, you are doing a lot. If you're in marketing and you're one person marketing team or walking and you're a one person marketing team, kudos, you're working, that's for sure. The running stage is focused on optimizing infrastructure. So again, what you're doing is working really well, but there's some opportunities that exist to go deeper and increase your efficiency and optimize what's already there. So common challenges include knowledge that's hit its limits. All of us are trying to constantly learn. Marketing is an ongoing game where things change day after day. And so it can be hard to keep up. There's often no real impetus to change. Like I said, things are humming along. Oftentimes people want to just go with status quo. It can be hard to really push beyond that. Research efforts are often light. Even for running organizations, they are not always doing the work to understand their audiences. The tech that you have might be great and be really impactful, but you have a lot of unused features that if you could tap into those might help your efficiency. And then strategies are often built on information that's 2 or 3 years old. So just continuing to iterate on your strategies. Next steps for those in the running stage is often about diving deeper into research, auditing your content and your UX. If you're in the running stage, you've probably produced a lot of content. And are you really stepping back to go, does this content still serve us? Does it still serve our audiences? How is it helpful? Do we still need it? Is it just clutter at this point? Testing and more testing, A/B testing, picking opportunities to do that. And then assessing data security and privacy practices. Of course, these are big button topics. They're just going to get more prevalent and more important. And so these organizations that are running are really starting to think about that if they haven't already. And then lastly, soaring. I won't spend too much time here just because nobody felt they were there, but they still have their own challenges. Don't think that they're immune. Often with organizations that are soaring, it's about experimenting and influencing others and helping others. So just know that big ideas demand big money. So if you're doing really well and you want to keep doing that and bringing new ideas to the table, it often takes resources. Content governance is often missing. Content governance is how you create, audit, manage, maintain, approve content. and how it gets archived. And so there's rules around that. It's typically from large organizations with a lot of content. It can be hard to share project nuances with leadership. They care about one thing, maybe you care about another. So finding those places of alignment can be a bit of a challenge. And then scalability. What you're doing is really working. How do you scale that across the entire organization? Next steps are just more testing and iterating, implementing content governance, iterating on new technologies as well, coaching your team. Often those that are in soaring have a lot to teach others. And so it could be your internal team, but also your peers, reaching out and doing speaking opportunities and things like that. And then seeking new ideas. Quite often when you're working within your org, you are in the 3,000 foot view, you're down in it, you're in the weeds, really hard to see that 30,000 foot view. And so going out and seeking new ideas, whether that's with new talent or outside resources, can be really important. I want to share with you guys some of our initial nonprofit data. So the great thing about the Mighty GPS is we're collecting data from organizations all over the country. And this data is across 194 nonprofits. I ran this at the beginning of the month. So it's through August. And so far what we're seeing is the majority of scores are between 35 and 79. So that does put people squarely in the walk, primarily in the walking and running. So you've got, remember that walking starts at 40%. And so you'll see that most of them are in walking and running. And we saw that from you guys. Well, we saw walking and crawling, but you can get there. We're also seeing that marketing budgets over 50,000 see increased marketing effectiveness. This does not mean that if you are spending less than that you cannot be effective. Absolutely. I have seen some of the smaller organizations that are coming through that are highly effective with a small, nimble team. So do not let that impact you, but it is, the data is showing us that there's an increase. Well, I'll share this. Oh no, let me back up. Orgs spending over 50,000 see increased marketing effectiveness. The orgs that are the most effective so far tend to be those spending between 50,000 and 100,000. They seemingly have enough to be resourceful, but must also be efficient with it. The org spending over 100,000 doesn't mean that you're not effective. It means that you just have to be really mindful of what is and isn't working, because there's likely some efficiencies available to you. So organizations that are spending between 50 and 100K are the most effective. Those spending over 100K are less effective than those spending between 50 and 100. Doesn't mean they're not effective. But we're seeing about an increase of about 5 to 10 percentage points across every category when an org is spending at least 50,000 a year. So all that to say, again, does not require you to spend more money. A lot of the changes that I'm going to talk about, you can do without spending money, just with the team that you have. But that's the data that we're seeing. I often get questions here about whether the GPS was built with large organizations in mind, and it was not. There is a correlation between, again, the more money you spend and that if you're over 50K and spend a year that you're more mature, but that difference is not drastic. And don't let these numbers scare you. Again, don't have to be spending 50K or more per year to be super resourceful. Okay, other data. Research and analytics is by far the lowest scoring category. It does not matter how much money you're spending, how big your org is in terms of revenue. Lowest category before. I'll show you the results here in a minute and you'll see what I made. Team dynamics ranks highest. And this is great news because it means we believe in our teams. Maybe some bias coming in there too because we're rating ourselves. But team dynamics is the highest ranking one, followed by branding and strategy. So if you're curious at the average scores for each nonprofit, for the nonprofits that have taken the GPS so far, they're scoring an average of 36% in research analytics. So you can see that's the only category where the average organization is crawling. Most of them are scoring much higher in the walking stages within all these other categories. Here's where the value really comes in. So you're going to get your score. You're going to understand your stage based on that. And we're going to give you a report. So you're going to get that immediate score. You'll see this organization. So I picked a larger organization to show you that they were in walking, and I'll show you their categories as well. I chose a larger one because I wanted you to see that even larger organizations can struggle in some areas. And so they were 55% and they were in walking. You're also going to get a score for each of your categories and a graph. So you can see at a glance where your strengths and areas of opportunity are. This nonprofit, again, has high name recognition, which is why their branding and strategy, I believe, is really strong. But you can see they're got a couple areas where they're going to need some improvement. And this is pretty typical that you'll see some areas that are high and some areas that are low. We have seen a few other orgs where it's all pretty even. But this is typical, the most typical, where you'll see some high and some low. With that report, we're going to break down for you in each category what your next steps are. So you'll see that their research and analytics score is 29%, and we break down for them what they can do as next steps. And you'll see there's resources for each next step. So again, we want to give you the tools to make these changes yourselves. If you're able to do that and just run with it. So again, there's one of these for each category in the report. We want you to use your report to spark conversations with your team. Is there alignment? Were the results what you expected? Were the areas of improvement areas that you expected, or did it not line up? Most people generally have a good sense of where they're going to land, and the information confirms it. It also allows you to build your case internally. So when you can show data like this that says, here's the areas we're struggling in, and here's what I think it would look like if we invested in this and what it would mean for us, then it's going to help you make that case for additional budget and time. It also allows you to prioritize. So it's really hard it can feel overwhelming to get these results because there's just so much you could do. But looking at those lower scores and going, is that an area of focus for us? And if the answer is yes, then it allows you to prioritize there. Also, you're going to be able to check back on the data. So say you take it right here at the end of the year to help you plan for 2023. End of next year, take it again and see what the results were. And then it also allows you to get expert advice, including those free resources. Okay, so I want to show you what this looks like in action, because it's one thing to get all the information, but then you actually have to do something about it, right? If you're going to make real impact at your organization. Okay, so the first thing I just want to mention is when you get your score, it's going to come to you via email. Well, you're going to get it on the webpage, but then the report's going to come to you via email. We're also going to encourage you to download this Get Started Planner. And so this will allow you, it's basically a template that allows you to fill out and figure out how to tackle those next steps. Because again, it can feel overwhelming. I'll show you this in more detail in a moment. So again, to use the organization I was showing you earlier, they're looking at the results. They're going, okay, we were walking at 55%. This is what our results looked like. These two areas are really low for us. And if I think about where I want to start, I go, yeah, those things are important. And actually research is really important. We haven't done it in a while. And I know that research really does affect all the other categories. When I better understand my audience, I can write better content for them. So instead of starting with UX design and content, I'm going to start with research and analytics. And so I'm going to go to that section of my report and I'm going to say, there's lots of options here. There's five options for where I could get started. I think I'm going to start with these three. I'm going to undergo some audience research, and that includes some surveys. And then I'm going to build audience personas once I have that data. And I'm going to click on that article, the one specifically for undergo some audience research. And I'm going to say, okay, now I've got the tools I need to be able to go do this. So you can see how you can do it on your own. And actually audience research really doesn't cost much money. The only thing that costs money when you're thinking about surveys and focus groups and things like that is you got to pay for, something like SurveyMonkey. And they have nonprofit discounts and it's really pretty cheap. And you might have to pay for, like, if say you're gonna have a focus groups, coffee, snacks for people that show up at this focus group. So it can't, and not even that if it's digital. So it can be really resourceful. The other thing I'll mention is there's 4 things you could do here. I highlighted 3. I would not choose any more than 3 things to start with. The minute you start choosing more than that, it can get to be too much, especially if you have a smaller team. You could even just choose 1 thing to start with. So there might be some overlap. So like there's undergoing audience research and surveys, there's overlap there. So that's kind of 1, and then the second one, but don't try to do too much or you're just going to lose momentum. Okay, so let me show you real quick what this thing does. Again, you've got your report, you're going to download this planner. You can or cannot use this. I think it's resourceful in that it kind of gives you a template for how to decide what to do next. And then once you decide what you're going to do next, to how, make it out a plan for using that tool. So for example, this org maybe decided they want to learn more from audience research. And so specifically to inform a program launch. Many of you are launching new programs. And so this org is like, okay, I'm going to focus on research and specifically around this program launch we've got coming up. So it asks you, what are the activities you need to undergo in order to, reach this goal? How will you measure each of those activities? What are the tactics for each activity? The timeline for those tactics? How you're going to put that activity into action, and then a budget. And so you can see how asking these questions and giving you an example as you're walking through that planner just makes it real easy to go, this isn't so overwhelming. I have a plan in place and I can tackle it. Okay, what's next? Again, you're going to be able to benchmark yourself. We recommend every 6 months to a year, depending on how fast you're moving. If it's taken a while to get through some of these next steps, give yourself a year to really see that impact. And hang on to your reports. You want to make sure you keep them at the ready. You can download them and make sure you have them so you can compare them very easily later. There is an org. It will allow you also to show progress in a way you haven't really been able to do before, because again, much of the data we have is just for digital. This is for overseeing all of your marketing. We have an organization who's not a client, but is a friend of the agency, meaning, we run into them a lot at conferences and things like that. And they actually took the beta launch. So they took it first in November 2021. So they have a little bit more time on most people, but they just took it again in September and shared the results with us. And they had grown 24% from walking into running with a concerted effort to follow the recommendations in the report. So it can work, and it has worked. And if you're curious about their results from November to September, I thought I would share with you. And you can see they were not super disparate in their scores, but they have all risen across research and branding and marketing. And then under UX design and content, that increased. Their technology actually dropped, and that totally can happen, that you would have a score drop, because when you're putting emphasis in some places, you may lose emphasis in others. And for them, they did not make any technology improvements that they needed to make over the last year. And so it's just gotten harder as the technology continues to get older. And then team dynamics, you'll see that number jumped hugely. They actually made a decision to put someone that had been doing marketing as part of their job into a full-time marketing role. And so that's where that's really coming from, that concerted effort to put more emphasis towards marketing in general. Future plans for the Mighty GPS. So I've shared some data with you guys. We're going to continue to collect that data across our different industries, across budgets, across revenue and spend. And we'll be creating benchmarking reports to help you share, here's where we sit and here's where our peers sit. And so that you'll be able to compare yourself. Eventually, you'll be able to do that digitally, where you say, hey, we're spending, less than 50,000 per year. And we have revenue of 3 million plus. And this is where our peers are benchmarked, and here's where our scores are. The reporting is definitely coming in 2023 for nonprofits. The electronic version of that, where you can personally put in your own categories, I'm not sure yet on that. Stay tuned. So action items: measure your effectiveness with the Mighty GPS. Review that customer report, including your overall score and your scores per category. And then based on those things and your organization's strategic goals, decide what areas you want to focus on first, and then use the resources provided both in the report and through the planner to create that plan of action. And then lastly, track your progress by taking the assessment again. I want to cover, before we get to questions, some quick FAQs. I hear a lot of the same questions over and over, so I just want to figure I'll go ahead and tackle them outright in case you're wondering yourself. Okay, but what if I don't have a large budget to implement changes? Again, many of the recommendations don't require money, but they do require time. So for example, if you find that your branding and strategy is low, and that really you don't feel like your messaging is what's hit, there's no foundational messaging that's been established, and everybody's just sort of saying what they want to about the org, and people have gone kind of rogue and not a lot of consistency. That is something you don't have to hire an agency for. You can come up with your internal messaging, you do the research if you need to inform that. It just takes time, right? So that's what I would say for some of these things are going to take money. Tech is not cheap. It's going to take money. But again, some things won't. Okay, so what if I don't have any time? Right? That's the next question. I'll tell you what I tell everybody, and that is that you've got to prioritize. You definitely, I can almost guarantee it, you do not have time to do everything that's in this report. But once you know what's not working for you, you can make a decision whether you're going to stop trying to prioritize it or stop doing it, or whether you're going to put emphasis there. So your messaging to leadership might be, we're doing okay. We could be doing better if I unprioritize X and instead focused on Y. So again, prioritization is key here. And there may also be some efficiencies with your tech. So let's say you might actually have some budget, but you don't have time. Quite often, there's things that we're doing manually that tech could be taking place of. Or maybe your website isn't great and people have to call you to find out things because they can't find it on the website. Making improvements to your website can actually increase the effectiveness, right? Because now people aren't having to field phone calls. So just ask yourself, what are some things your team's doing manually now that maybe could be solved with some more efficient technology? How do I convince my boss / board / leadership, whatever that means to you, to invest in the needed changes? So let your numbers help paint the picture here. Where are you not doing well? What could your org look like if you were doing that well? So for example, say that your marketing and SEO category is low and it's the lowest one, and you could be doing better there. And you haven't embraced digital in a way that is really required, especially here post-pandemic or maybe mid-pandemic, hard to say, but do some research and figure out what that would look like and what it could mean if it worked. And so that helps to go to the boss with those sort of numbers. Again, for the things that are working, how can you invest more? And what would that look like if you invest more? And what is the cost of doing nothing? So is now fine? Is what we're doing fine? Then, okay, you know that, and your job is to maintain, right? But if the goal is growth, and it quite often is, then that typically means investment of some sort. Also, make sure when you're talking to the people that hold the purse strings, that you understand what motivates them. So is it fundraising? Is it your reputation in the community? We're all trying to drive impact. We know that, right? But where do their particular motivations lie? So those are some questions to maybe help get you to the point where you feel like you're empowered to go ask for more. And then I don't have any control over our technology programs. So this is more likely if you're at a large organization or if you're at a chapter that's using technology that the overarching brand is using. So you are going to be limited here. Just want to acknowledge it. I understand it's a big problem. And if that's an area of improvement for you when you take the GPS, share it with teams that have the power to change that and really talk about the cost of that. Again, if people are having to call you because they can't do something, or if it's hurting your donations, I'll give you an example. We work with an organization that's funded by the University of Texas. So technically they are part of the University of Texas. They are their own organization. They have to use the University of Texas's fundraising system, which has 1 million options in it. You can donate to every school and every program at UT within it. And so they're one of like 300, and it's cumbersome, it's annoying. They cannot change that. But maybe there's ways to work around it, or to talk about how they could have more presence, or how they could prepare people. That's what that's going to look like when they go there. Anyway, so you can also be creative. You may not have control over your website platform or your fundraising platform, but you do probably have control over social media, your speaking, your print, etc. Quickly want to mention, Mighty Citizen is in the middle of a 3-part series to help organizations prepare for 2023. You're actually seeing the first one right now. We also did it last week ourselves, but you haven't missed anything. And if you're interested, the second one will be on digital strategies to get you ready for 2023. And the third one will be on building a 2023 communications plan. Again, a written plan to get you ready for 2023. And that can be accessed at mightycitizen.com/webinars123. Milena, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Awesome. Well, guys, I really hope that you have enjoyed today's session and everything that we've learned. now is Q&A time. So if you have any questions that Rachel wasn't able to cover or didn't cover during the end there, please submit them in the Q&A box and we will go ahead and make some time to answer your questions. Something that I was curious about is I know that you use teams as a way to like measure effectiveness, and that's a part of the GPS. Do you include team salaries in the overall marketing budget, or how much a team does budget for their marketing? Okay.
When I ask about marketing spend, I mean actual spend. So
Okay.
tech spend, no, I'm not. That's a great question. And I actually feel like I should clarify now in the GPS itself that we're talking about, we're not including salaries.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I was curious about personally.
It's a great question.
If anybody has any questions, feel free, type them in, let us know. Obviously, Rachel, super thankful for you and joining us on this session. I know as a marketer and former fundraiser, this is incredibly useful for me. And we've talked about it. I feel like if you're in fundraising and you're writing appeals, you are in marketing. So this is super great information.
Absolutely.
Well, we got a quiet bunch. No questions.
So I answered them all clearly.
That's good. Everybody, of course, I'm going to put up here on the next slide. You can see the Mighty Citizen website, and that will include the links to the slides, the white paper, and the GPS planner, which can give you all the results and the information that was covered today. There's the QGIV website and our contact us email if you have any questions about QGIV. Of course, the slides and the recording, as well as links to all of these resources, will be emailed to everybody tomorrow. So if you want to keep this presentation, share it with some of your colleagues, you can. And that's all we've got for today. So thank you, everybody, for joining us and spending time with us this afternoon. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Milena.